Hello, everyone. I'm Faith, like I've just said, and we've been having this course over summer, looking at power and privilege. We've started with some general definitions on power before we moved to the history of development, and we looked at some of the colonial legacies that we often mention in conversation within the sector and what that actually looks like, where that came from. And how that has impacted some of the power dynamics that we see today. After that, we looked at some privilege categories and power structures, and these are all covered in the workbooks that you've all been receiving. So it's never too late to go back if you haven't completed anything. It's completely free for you to do whenever you would like. And then we have also, in the last two workbooks, looked at locating privilege. So looking at some of the different social categories that exist in our context, and looking at maybe where they come from and the power behind them, and also what we can identify in our own contexts and situations. And in the final workbook, we have been looking at ceding power, so rectifying some of those power imbalances that may be inherent to the work we do and may be specific to our own individual and organizational context as well. And so that is kind of where we have been at with the course for anyone who has maybe joined late or is just dropping in. That's kind of what we've been looking at so far. And so I actually wanted to open it up to everyone and to just find out how you found the last two workbooks for those of you that have completed it or have had a look. I wanted to just, open it up for anyone to share, any learning or any points they were dying to raise. I will take silence as it was fantastic. I have no questions. You're amazing. Yep. Wow, thanks guys. Okay. And then in that case, we can actually just move straight on to our activity. So obviously we kind of know already from the workbooks why it's important to look at our own privilege. And if you listen to the podcast, Tina was amazing in terms of going into what positionality looks like and how to actually locate that and why we should do that. And some of that is to ensure that when we are working in partnerships, especially, I've seen someone say there's an echo. Is anyone else finding that there's an echo? Yes? Seeing a lot of head nods?
Your voice sounds a bit, you were saying before, it goes a bit computery. It's sounding a bit like that.
Oh no, okay. I'm going to pause and just reach to get my headphones, and hopefully that will get rid of any echoes. I hope that's okay. Apologies, everyone. Just give me one moment. As I was saying, it's really important to be aware of privilege when we are doing work that we do, like we've looked at in the workbooks, due to some of those colonial legacies, and also due to wider social imbalances in terms of power, whether that is due to class, whether that's due to gender. These things exist in society generally, and especially within the sector. It is so important for us to be mindful of this and to be able to recognize our own positions of privilege and of power. And so I wanted us using some examples to actually discuss privilege and identifying them. So we're going to, I'm just going to count heads quickly. Okay, yeah, we can kind of evenly-ish split into two breakout groups. and there'll be a link to see the example, and it's just a short paragraph describing someone. And if you can all just identify any potential social categories you think they may be a part of, and what privileges or lack of that may mean for that person. We will do that just shortly for about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on when people finish. So I'm just going to put everyone into the breakout rooms. All right. Has that worked? Okay. Yes.
Unmuted.
Sorry, I'm always like, yeah, am I in the breakout room? Am I not? Oh, okay. I'm just going to double check that no one's been left behind.
Okay. I'll stay here.
How are you doing though? How have you been? I feel like it's been a while since I've seen your face.
Yeah, I'm self-isolating still.
Fair. How has that been going?
Well, I've got a royal throne, more often known as a sofa.
Lovely, lovely, lovely.
My royal throne with cushions.
So I think we may be missing some people, and I'm not sure where they have gone. Emma should be here by the looks of it. And it's saying she is in this room and not in the other room. Oh, I'm just going to put for your organization, what is best for your group, what is best for your partner, and what is best within that context. And also, it's so important to think long term, you know, so when we locate our privilege, we're thinking of the here and now. And when we're thinking about balancing power, it can sometimes focus on just the here and now, and also the past as in terms of what's come before, what legacies are existing right now. It's just as important to think of the future, think long term. So think about giving power and using power in a manner that long-term is sustainable. So whatever the project is able to continue in an equitable manner in the long term, as well as in the short term and in the present. It's equally as important to think about this. So in the workbook, there's a section that discusses exit strategies and thinking about long-term sustainability of projects. So this is something that will likely be very useful for partnerships which are international, as you often want to think in the long term. I think actually we might have some people may have already had this discussion in the session too, so apologies if I'm repeating myself, but thinking about long term, what happens if you're not there? Like we've had the pandemic, which has meant that people couldn't physically move around. Thinking about what could happen if you are not able to be there, if you don't want to be there anymore. What about that project? What about your aims? What is the goal that you are trying to achieve, and how can that be thought about in a long-term and a sustainable manner? So for this next discussion, we're going to go into pairs and discuss some of the ways, hopefully based on the workbooks and some of the work that you've done in those exercises, discuss some of the ways that you've worked to make the power more balanced, more equitable in your own work. And this again can be previous work, it can be present work, it can be work that you are planning to do. So I'm going to just assign everyone to breakout rooms.
Faith, I was just going to say, I need to go at 12.
That is
We'll be
totally
finished
fine.
by then. I'll be able to go.
that's totally fine. Oh, it's giving me the option to recreate, but that's not what we want to do. Apologies whilst I just work with technology for a second.
Do we want people in different groups? Because we've got enough pairs.
Yeah, I'm going to put people into pairs.
Cool.
But it is not giving me. Kath, I'm just going to ask if on your end, if you're able to help with the breakout rooms, because it's.
I think I messed it up because when I came in, I overtook your power.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
That's what it is.
Ceded power to Kath.
Okay, so yeah. Also, can I just say hi to everybody? And sorry for anybody who I am to everybody that I'm late. I appreciate it. Right. 3. Okay, so Nitin, you're with Trevor, Donald, you're with Wendy, and then Emma, Julian, and myself will be invited to room 3, but we just won't go. But what I will do is I'll pop into for room 1. So for Trevor and Nitin, if you go to this slide, if you want to, I'm sorry, I'll tell you what, I've done something bad. We will, here we go. So Trevor and Nitin, if you want to take notes, you can do so in this link here. I'll just write Trevor. So if you wanted to make notes, you don't have to, but you can do here. We might find it helpful to reflect back afterwards. And for Wendy, you can use this link. And if you can both go to slide, so Wendy, go to slide 2, and Nitin and Trevor, you go to slide 3, please. Okay, you'll be sent to your rooms now. Faith, when are we coming back?
We are coming back in 10, so at 12.
Okay, fab. See you all in 10 minutes.
So Kath, did you say don't join?
Yeah, don't join because it'll just be the team.
Okay, cool.
Found that, oh, bye Nitin. If in one situation you have found that, for example, you were able to get down to the 2nd level of beneficiaries, but you weren't able to get down to the 3rd or the 4th level, you know, thinking about that in the next round, for example, of the project, and thinking about what could have been done differently, and ensuring that, you know, you're, as much as you can, you're speaking with those people themselves as well, where possible. I think that may not look, that may not be the easiest thing initially. I think, like you did say, it's always easier said than done doing anything. But that rounds of trial and sometimes error and sometimes success, hopefully, is so key in balancing those power dynamics and in ensuring that learning is being taken forward, and that power, where appropriate, is being ceded to the appropriate groups, to the appropriate organization as well. Trevor, I don't know if you wanted to share what you had discussed with Nitin.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually. We talked about examples of some project which I'm working on in Kenya, and you know, Nitin talked about something that's happening somewhere else, and it was quite interesting. I like discussion. Unfortunately, it wasn't long enough to really get a good chat together. We didn't use your board thing because we were busy chatting away, and you know, it's quite interesting. And I think discussion, I like debate the discussions because that's how we all learn. And you know, I've made a good contact there with Nitin. I don't know how Nitin feels about that. But I quite enjoyed that little session.
Well, thank you for sharing, and apologies that we had to come back before you could really dig into that question and that topic. But don't worry, there's still time. Seeing as it is a smaller group of us, I am thinking that we can just stay in here, as half of us are HCA staff. But in thinking about ceding power and this course, I think a big aim of this course is to provide that space to share the things that you've been learning over the weeks and in bringing in your own personal context. So for the next activity, I actually wanted us in a smaller group to think about your partner's context, and to maybe share some learning that perhaps you think could be useful for somebody else to hear, maybe that has worked for you in terms of ceding power or in terms of balancing power and doing the work you do in a more equitable way. What learning do you think that you can share with the group that you can say, okay, actually in this particular instance, to mitigate or to acknowledge some of those unequal power balances, here's what we did. And potentially this could be helpful to the next person or in their own next context or situation or partner that they're working with. So there is I don't think there's a need for breakout rooms, unless you guys would like to have your own 3-person breakout room, then we can do that as well.
I've got one example of something that I did very recently to help ceding the power, because I was aware that some of the decisions were being made at the governance level within the partnership. I set up a Google questionnaire that could be opened up on a mobile phone to get through to the target audience, to be able to bring in their opinions into the governance group. Didn't work 100% because not many of them had used a Google questionnaire before. So technologically, it was we had to aid and support as best we could. But it brought in the client group, their voice into the leadership decision-making process through this medium. And so I was able to essentially challenge the single voice that was coming out of the partner organization that was defining direction. And that the direction was actually being defined by the target audience better, in my view.
Kath, is that a hand? Huh?
That is a hand. That is a hand. And Donald, that sounds awesome. That sounds really cool. I really liked how reflective you were in terms of like recognizing that not everybody could access it. I guess my question would be about, okay, so like phase 2, if you to do it again, would you do it exactly the same way again, or would there be some kind of changes in approach?
I think, yes, we would do it again, but what I would do the next time is use the local language within the questionnaire rather than English.
Amazing. Can I also ask a question? So was that then, it was a barrier due to the language or due to the technology?
I think it was both.
Okay.
There are two obvious things that I could see that was coming through in the responses. One word answers rather than a dialogue, things like that. So I would like to be able to use local language. Again, it's dependent on because we were looking at 9 local financing groups, microfinancing groups, to be able to bring in some seed money into those 9 groups, that we needed to have those groups saying what they wanted money for, rather than the person at the top of the governance ladder saying we need X, Y, Z, we need livelihoods, education, health, and all the rest of it, which is obvious. We could see that, but we needed to show the evidence from the grassroots.
Yeah,
and local language can do that. And if they get some kind of telephone support from people within the community to be able to answer the questions, this is what they're looking for, etc., etc., that would be helpful. Again, ceding the power away from Wales.
Yeah, I was actually going to offer a thought on that particular situation, which is maybe, like you said, telephone support or holding I know in some situations you can have a time and day or a few times on a few days where people can come in and sit down and use a laptop or a phone or whatever device to actually fill out that questionnaire, so that it doesn't have to be that they have to find their own device or get familiar with it on their own, but actually in a space where there's somebody there to help them get online or get to the questionnaire itself. So that kind of can also be a potential way to remove that barrier of access and help better seed power.
Having somebody on a motorbike ready to drive 15 miles was useful.
Even better, even better. Trevor and Wendy, I don't know if either of you have a learning that you want to share that might be useful regarding ceding power or just working in an equitable manner. Sometimes we can actually think about this before we start the project and ensure that actually from the get-go we are working in an equitable way. So it doesn't necessarily need to be ceding the power in a post unequal power balance. It can also be before as well, just if that helps open up that question a bit more.
Well, we've actually done one of the things I talked about with Nitin was by giving ownership to giving ownership of something away can sometimes empower the groups who. Well, I'll give you an situation. Responsible Assistance received some COVID-19 emergency funding from Welsh Government's Wales Africa COVID-19 fund. And we ran an emergency mission in the Kibwezi region of Kenya to distribute food, etc., etc. And at the end of it, there was £1,000 left in the budget, which I couldn't spend because it was supposed to be spent here in Wales. We were going to do some presentations to schools, but because of the lockdown, schools were closed. So I said, look, I want to send this to Kenya. And they said, well, can't you lose it in administration over here? I said, no, we're all volunteers, it's pointless. So I had to apply and got written permission to be able to send it over to Kenya. What we did with it, communicated with our project coordinator over there, Dr. Cecilia. We thought, what might be the best way to go about this, especially after the COVID situation over there? We divided that money into microloans. And for our 3 FERSHA cooperatives, of which there was 61 members, we divided that into loans of between 500 and 5,000 shillings, which is £3.45 and £34 per loan, of which I have to pay interest on, but the interest goes back in towards keep sustaining the program. the loan thing to make sure it's done. And at first we were running it through our partner over there, the Byd-eang Disabled People's Organisation, but we could see a bit of a power and privilege sort of situation. So what we did, we gave ownership of the fund, of the loans, to the individual groups, 3 FERSHA groups, for them to work out with their members. And it has been so successful that from that initial £1,000, we've now funded, we had 3 initial FERSHA cooperatives. We've now got 9 with a total of 221 members. The loan fund, through the interest build up, has built up to about 8 times that money. The businesses, which the reason why the loans was to support their businesses, 80% of all the businesses, enterprises, the disabled people and their families were running or started, are growing and succeeding. And that's all because we gave ownership and power of that, control of that thing to the source. So there was none of this them and us, or this is what you do, because I run a business over here, and I know what it's like dealing with banks to get money, and you're dealing with a them and us situation, and they see me in a wheelchair, a disabled person, and that's an example of discrimination which exists, and it's live around the world. But by bypassing that, it's made something really successful. So that was my example. That's what I talked to Nitin about.
All right, thank you. And that is, yeah, a very interesting example of directly giving over that ownership, which one could translate as power, to the people themselves to actually be able to decide what is most appropriate, where would this money be best spent, what would be most useful. So I think that is a great example. Oh, hi, Kath.
Sorry, babe. Keep jumping in. Turns up late and then rolls over everyone else's conversation. Sorry. I just wondered, Trevor, like a point of learning for myself in particular, I guess, was, you know, how do you have that conversation with your partner organisation about saying, right, you currently control this, but there's an idea that we should, that should be kind of, that decision-making power should go to somebody else. Was it your partner that came up with the suggestion, or was it that idea come in Wales? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do we manage those kind of conversations?
Our project coordinator, Dr. Cecilia, she's not a, she could see issues, and our partners are still involved, obviously, but not in controlling the actual funds. They don't hold the bank. The actual funds now are owned by the individual groups. And
I guess it was more around, how do you, like, is Cecilia the partner organisation? Is Cecilia the director of the partner organisation?
She's our project coordinator, and she's more or less our partner. We've been working with Cecilia since we first did our exploratory visit to Kenya in 2013, and you know, with the Byd-eang Disabled People's Organisation, we've been working with them as well, but they're not bankers, or they don't have the capacity to be able to do, because the region's quite big and they cover the whole region, and they're dealing mainly with issues of a different nature. So they're still involved with us, you know, they're still our partner, but not on the actual loan thing. They're our partner on the FERSHA initiative, but not on the loan thing, because they help coordinate the whole of the groups in the region. So it's actually the loan fund. That's what we gave ownership to the individual groups.
Okay.
So, and it was a bit of diplomacy involved in organising that, as you probably appreciate. but it worked, and everybody's happy.
Awesome. Yeah, it's the diplomacy thing that it is challenging, right? It can be challenging.
Right. Well, I love it because that's I spent a lot of my adult life volunteering for an organisation called the British Executive Service overseas, and we used to go all over the world and advise mainly to developing countries, or as it was called then, third world countries. And so I've worked in Africa, the Far East. I've worked all over the place, usually between 3 and 6 months at a time. And you learn about diplomacy. You have to be very diplomatic to be able to work with the organisations. And again, it's this thing of not showing power or privilege, but making sure that ownership or control is done on the side. And because I was involved in the fashion trade and doing ladies' handbags and things, I could actually go on the shop floor and physically do all the work myself and set an example. And that really, to make the people who are actually on the shop floor doing the work, making the products, feel responsible for the outcomes, and working with the organisations who had to keep it all together financially, obviously, because you've got to then all the marketing side and the financial side, but making more of a I had a good reputation at the time. That's why I always had plenty of work, of making things work and succeed. And diplomacy is very important.
Thank you for that, Kath. I hope that's cleared, and I hope that's clearer for everyone. Thank you for that question. That was really useful because yes, that diplomacy in ceding power, in the act of realizing that there's an issue, but then how do you actually implement that? How do you change the plans? I think that was a great example. So thank you, Kath, and thank you, Trevor, for sharing that. Wendy, I don't know if you're about to say something because I can see you're off mute.
Oh, no, I was just off mute. No, I was just going to say that actually, I think the pandemic did us a favour in many ways in making us sort of step back a bit from the practice of going to Africa to deliver various projects and to find other ways around enabling the project to go on without us physically there, and by sort of empowering partners on the ground to take over things, right at the start. Actually, we were sending some small computers over, and we're intending to go ourselves and carry out some training for the teachers that were receiving them. And when that was sort of put on hold, one of the experienced teachers in a school there sort of took upon himself to organise the training session, and did it very successfully, sort of more or less modelling on what he'd seen us do, I think, in the past. Sort of taking registers and getting feedbacks and things. But I think he also was then sort of motivated and sort of given the confidence to take it upon himself then to be on hand to help other people with problems that they in their schools. So it was quite a good result out of the pandemic, really.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you're so right in that it definitely put people in situations where that was the only choice, unless you wanted to stop. If you wanted things to continue, then it was about finding alternative ways that it could continue without you or someone from the organization being physically in country. And so a final question for everyone before we end the session is, moving forward, what is something else? What is the next thing that you will be doing to shift the power and ensure that your work is being done in an equitable manner and is fairly balanced? Oh, so sorry about that, the wind, is being balanced power-wise within your partnerships. So you can take a moment to think, and if you want, you can put it in the chat. I will make a note so that everyone can remember and share that as well.
I'm going to employ Trevor to come up with some ideas.
Oh, Trevor, I think you're speaking, but you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just in the middle of typing a thing saying I've got to leave now because I've got a meeting starting 3 minutes time, and I don't want to sort of miss the start of it. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say goodbye to everybody, and thank you for.
Thank you for joining us.
I've enjoyed this session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, so do either of you have something that moving forward you'd like to do, maybe something you haven't done or something you've done previously that you would like to improve in terms of shifting the power?
I think I might get off my throne, often known as the sofa.
Okay.
Walk about, see what the insects are doing, and plant the right seeds. That's a metaphor. That is a metaphor, okay?
How can I bite it in a...
I wasn't sure. I was like, I'm waiting to see where we're going with this one.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us what the metaphor meant? Unless I'm the only one that didn't quite.
Okay, get out of the office. Don't just talk to the trustees or the leaders. Definitely make sure that you've got evidence that shows the need at the local level.
That is, yes, much clearer for me anyway. And definitely a great way to think about ceding power in terms of actually speaking to people directly and not just that top level of governance within groups and within organizations. Wendy, I don't know if you had something.
Well, I think we already use WhatsApp a lot in sort of informal ways, but keeping in touch with a lot of teachers, both in their individual right and as members of a kind of a teachers organisation where they share their gripes about the profession and the kind of things they need. So I think continue to foster that, but also I think possibly to make a more formal arrangement with a small group of our partners to sort of meet regularly and sort of not only when something big comes up, but so that we sort of discuss things generally more frequently. I think that will perhaps enable us to understand better what's going on, really.
Definitely. I think that's a great point. In just having those frequent discussions allows that space to raise anything, whether it's just
and make them sort of only semi-formal, really. Just, this is let's have a regular catch up and just chat about whatever but it sets the context better, doesn't it? I think.
Yes, exactly. It helps build that relationship and allows for just a fairer way of working when you actually know what's been going on with your partners and are able to identify which ways they might prefer more power or how that would be done. So I think that's very key as well. So thank you for that, Wendy. We are at 12:30, but I am just going to ask if anyone has any burning questions they wanted to raise.
How can I grow my hair back?
Can I watch a poll?
Say again?
Kath's just going to launch a poll.
Oh,
All right.
we should have guessed.
So if you could just
but I can't, Faith, I can't. I did have the power of polling when I joined, but maybe when left, I lost the power.
Okay, they didn't cede the power properly to you.
I don't have the power of polling, Donald. Do you run it, Faith?
yes, I have got
Perfect.
it. I am launching the poll.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Okay.
I think it's just 4 questions, guys. Thank you.
I found 5. Not a very large sample.
No.
No.
Not the largest sample, but we will always still appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
Just as important from 2 or 10 people.
Yes.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Most interesting. Bye-bye.
What's coming up in the future?
Mm.
On the 15th, we've got the Anti-Racism Community of Practice.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in joining, a lady called Sophie, who owns, I'm going to stop recording,